In this video, we're going to go over a few of the materials that are available to you in Maya, and we'll look at some of the options for each of the materials. First one we'll look at is the Lambert. Let's select our sphere and right-click on it and go down to Material Attributes, and we see we have our default Lambert on our sphere. So let's reassign a new material to our sphere. So we'll right-click on it and say Favorite Material, and we'll put a new Lambert. So now we have another Lambert, and it's not called Lambert 1, it's called Lambert 4. As you create new materials on your objects, they're just going to keep adding another number onto the end of the name of the shader. When we first look at our attributes in our shaders, you'll see we first have one called Type, and there's a drop-down menu. And if you open that up, you can see we have a list of all the different shaders that we have. Instead of having to create new shaders, once you have one assigned to your object, you can change what type of material you would like to use through this drop-down menu. So we have a Lambert on our sphere right now, but if we would like to change that to a different material, say for a Blinn, we can just do this right from this drop-down menu. And you can see how our material has changed on our shader. And now we have a Blinn assigned to this sphere. Let's bring this back to a Lambert. Well, notice that a Lambert is a matte type material. So if we do a render, there we go. I just have a light in my scene right now. So you can see that a Lambert is a matte. It's a flat type material. There aren't any highlights or anything on our material. This is something that would be good for any kind of matte rubber or clay or something like that. Let's go back to our Lambert so we can see our options. First one in the common material attributes is color. So we can adjust the color with this slider, or we can come in here and just click on our color swatch and just adjust the color to any color we would like it to be. The next one is transparency. As we move it to the right, our object becomes transparent. So when transparency is set to black, it's completely opaque. And when the transparency is set to white, it is completely transparent. And any shade of gray becomes a level of transparency. Ambient color will brighten up your object. And you can see that we get samples of what our shader is going to render like in this sample window. Incandescence will really brighten the image up a lot. So if we turn our ambient up and do a render, you can see it just brightens our color. Now if we bring our incandescence up, you'll see that it almost looks like it's illuminated. So it brightens it up all the way to making it white. The next option is bump mapping, which we'll go over in another video. Diffuse will darken and lighten your color. And those are the common attributes for the Lambert material. So let's switch materials and let's assign a Blinn to this sphere. I'll go to Assign Favorite Materials and Blinn. And right off the bat, you'll see that this shader looks different because now we have some highlights on this shader. So let's take a look what this looks like. And you can see that we have reflections and we have a highlight that is responding to the light that we have in our scene. So the common materials attributes are the same. We have the color, the transparency, the ambient incandescence. But then we come down to this area and we have something called specular shading. Now, the specular corresponds to this highlight that we have on our sphere. And as we adjust the eccentricity, it adjusts that highlight, and we have something called specular roll-off, which also adjusts that highlight. If you want to have a better feedback in your viewport as to what is being changed in these shaders, you can come up to your renderer and change that to viewport 2. And now you can see the specular roll-off, what kind of effect it has. So the specular roll-off is going to make your highlight brighter. The higher the number, the brighter it is, and the dimmer, the lower. And the eccentricity is going to determine the size. So when at a low value, it's a pinpoint kind of highlight, and it can spread out as you bring the eccentricity up. We also have a specular color, which we can adjust. The slider will adjust the lightness value of it, and then you also have the option of coming in and just selecting it and changing the color manually. And then we have a slider for reflectivity. So we can bring this all the way down so there will be no reflections. Let's do a little render. And you can see we have the yellow highlight, and we have no reflections anymore. And we brought the eccentricity down low, so we have a nice little tight pinpoint specular highlight on this object now. Let's change this from a Blinn to a Phong. And we'll see that when we do that, our specular color stays the same. So we still have the yellow specular highlight, but instead of having two options in changing the look of our specular, we only have one. It's something called cosine power. And as we bring it down, it gets wider. And as we bring it up higher, we get a tighter pinpoint highlight. We can bring this down and see what this looks like. You can see our highlight is getting larger. And if we bring the specular color down, you can see it starts fading our highlight out. Everything else is pretty much the same and works the same way. We can change the shader again. Let's close this. I'm going to change the shader a different way. We had done it through the Hypershade, and we have done it by going through Favorite Material. Let's go to this option, Assign New Material. When you do that, you get this Assign New Material dialog box. And this looks very much like the left-hand side of the Hypershade. So if we go up to this area where it says Maya, and then click on Surface, we'll see these are all of our surface materials that we can apply to our objects. So let's select Phong E. And now we have a Phong E attached to our object. Now a Phong E is similar to a Phong, except we have more options for our specular. We have a roughness and a highlight size, a whiteness value, which looks like it adjusts the color in the very center of this highlight. And we have a specular, overall specular color. And again, the reflectivity. So if we do a render of this, you can see what kind of effect that we're having with our speculars. Now, another shader that we can use is called Anistropic. So let's go back to Assign New Material. And we can select Anistropic. Now what an Anistropic shader will do, it adjusts your specular highlight so you can have non-round highlights on your object. This would be good for someone with long hair, the way a specular highlight would drape around someone's head, or for metal, some kind of like brushed metal. So you can see in this material sample up here what kind of look that you will get with this Anistropic shader. So let's do a render of our sphere. And you can see that we have our specular highlight elongated down the side of our sphere. You can adjust that highlight. We have a few different options here. We have one called angle, which will adjust the angle of that highlight on our object. So now you can see we were coming up and down, and now we're going kind of across. And then the spread will adjust the size of that highlight. And if you make the spread X and the spread Y the same size, it will be a round highlight. As soon as you make a difference between the spread X and the spread Y, that's when you start getting them stretching out. So let's open up the Hypershade. And you can see that we have an Anistropic material, which is good for brushed metal. And it gives you elongated specular highlights. We have a Lambert, which is a matte type material you can use for paper, walls. We have a Phong, which gives you a specular highlight with one control. A Phong E, which gives you more control over how your specular highlight looks on your object. And then we have a Blinn, which again gives you different controls to be able to control your specular highlight. Phong is good for plastics and metals, and Blinn is good for metals. It depends on how you adjust your specular highlights. I want to show you two more materials. The first one is going to be located in a different place. So let's go to this assign new material. And we had been going to this area under Maya and Surface. And these are all the surface materials that Maya gives you. Well, because we're rendering with Mental Ray actually supplies us with a number of materials that we can use for our objects. So if we go under Mental Ray and click on Materials, you'll see we have a whole bunch of other materials that we can use. This one, this Mia material, is a great material to use for glass or metals. I will go over this in detail at a later date, but we can just click on this to assign it. And if we look at our Mia material, you can see we have a lot of different options here. We could do a render, and you can see that we're getting reflections and highlights, and this material does work very well when you're working with transparencies and refractions, and for having natural looking reflections as well. Another fun shader that you can play with and get some really nice effects is called a car paint shader. And if you come down to assign new material, we'll go to the same place, Mental Ray and Materials, and we have MI Car Paint. So let's click on this. And the car paint will simulate what the paint will look like on an automobile. So let's do a render. And you can see that we have this flaky kind of look around our highlights. Let's zoom in here so we can get a better look at what this is doing. So we have a number of different options to change the color. You have your base color. We have the lit color. So that changes where the highlight is. We actually have something called an edge color, which we can change, which will light up the edge of the object. We have specular adjustments. And then we have something called flake parameters. That's these spots that we see over in this area. So if we want to bring down the size of our flakes, we can adjust the flake scale. So now they're all a lot smaller. And then all of these will do different things. The flake weight, let's try increasing that. Now we got a lot more showing up, more intense. So now they're more subdued if you bring that down. We also have an option called dirt. And if we bring up this dirt weight, it'll put a layer of whatever this color is or texture over our object on top of the material. So it'll give it a layered kind of look. So now it's kind of dulled down because we're using this gray color. Throw an orange on top of that. We'll see what it looks like. Let's turn this up to 0.5. So you can see now we have an orange layering effect on top of our shader. But you can get a lot of really nice looks with this shader, especially with this flakes and all these reflection controls. So you can play around with this one and get some really nice looks. There's one more shader I wanted to go over. And this one is a shader that works independently of any lights. And it's called the surface shader. So I'm going to place that onto this grid. If we look at our renders, you can see that we have a 1 point light in this scene, and it's lighting up our grid, and it's lighting up this sphere. And you can see, we're not getting uniform light. It's a little brighter over here and a little darker towards the edges over here. Now what the surface shader will do is make the color on this plane a uniform color, and the light will have no effect on it. So no matter how bright that light is or how dim the light is, this plane will always have the exact same color. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's go to Assign Favorite Material and go to Surface Shader. You can see our out color. This is the section where we're going to change the color of the plane. Our plane turned black because our out color is black. So let's come in here and change it to a green color. And I will leave this open so we can compare this color with what we render. Everywhere on this plane is the exact same color as this. So it works independently of any light. I can actually even hide this light. See, my light is gone. And let's render this. And nothing shows up on the sphere except for the reflection of this plane, but our plane is illuminated with the uniform color. Now we will use this when we go over lighting a room. The way I used this was I had a window and I put an image on this plane and put it behind my window so I can have a backyard, an image of a backyard through the window. When we get into that video, you'll see how I utilize this shader. And that is a quick overview of some of the different materials that are available to use in Maya.